Well, greetings, people of the internet. Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, I'm going to show you how I load, install, and configure Proxmox. So buckle up. It's going to be a fun ride. So lately, I've been getting a lot of you asking me, well, how do you install and configure Proxmox for your use? You know, my use case might be different than yours. I specifically like to pass through things using PCI pass-through under Proxmox. One of the main reasons I use this hypervisor over others, because it's easier, trivial to do that. So with that in mind, what I'm going to try to do today is install Proxmox on the AMD Epyc machine, show you how I do it, soup to nuts, how I do all the updates, how I set it up for PCI pass-through, how I block out certain modules, and then we're going to go actually watch how I do that on a virtual machine, how I then pass a video card through to the virtual machine. So it should be a fun ride. Let's go get started right now. So I'm kind of doing this backwards, but in order to show you how I got to this point, I have to show you how to prepare if you need to reload Proxmox. And I don't need to reload Proxmox, but I'm gonna reload Proxmox. So I can show you all how I do it soup to nuts. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is I've created a couple of virtual machines on here that I don't want to lose. So I need to back them up. But I need to show you how to set up a backup location in order to no, we won't worry about that. I'm just going to show you right now that I'm going to back them up really quickly so that I have a copy of them. So in this machine, I have a Tesla M40 video card, and I have a NVIDIA GTX 1660, and I'm passing both of those through to these VMs, and the VMs are working fine. So I want to keep a good copy of these VMs somewhere. So I'm going to come over here, select the VM, come over here to backup. I'm going to do backup now. I'm going to do a stop, which does basically a full backup. I'm not going to protect this. I really don't care. If it were a domain controller or something like that, I might protect it. I'm also going to accept the compression the way they have it, ZSTD fast and good. You could make it with none if space wasn't an issue for you. I'm going to say space is not an issue for me. So I'm not going to do any compression. Your mileage might vary. And I'm going to click on backup. And then I'm going to let this thing run. And then I'm going to rinse and repeat for the second virtual machine. And then when I come back, we'll get started on installing Proxmox and how I do it. So here's the Super-Epyc. So in order for me to show you how I set up Proxmox, I need to get it out of here and onto the workbench. We got some changes coming up on this workbench. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. So let's go back here to the back of the server rack here, and let's pull. There's power. And we'll just leave that up here. This is the management LAN, the blue cable. And then over here is a DAC cable and an SFP connection. And we're going to need that to run across the floor over to the workbench. So I'm just going to set it up there for now. And then let's get this server out and onto the bench. So I'm going to take this and we're going to walk over here. Now, I've stripped this thing down to the bare necessities. Oh, but don't get a copyright strike. Anyway, I've taken out the M40 Tesla and I've taken out the 1660. Because I don't want there to be any problems when I'm installing Proxmox on this little beastie. Now, all I have is a 1 terabyte Crucial NVMe drive in here. That's all I have. I have no other hard drives in here, nothing like that. It's the AMD Epyc. But just to make my life easy, pulled everything out except for the NIC card, the 10 gig NIC, and the RAM. And the CPU and everything else. So what I'm going to do now is plug it all in. I'm going to put this little USB key thingy in here. And my management connection is going to go here. I'm not using the internal network cards. So I'm going to plug in my monitor for my IPMI right there. I'm not going to plug in the power. And then I'm going to take this cable and then up to, oh my goodness, I put it right up here. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. Nope, that's the wrong way. I'm going to plug that in there until it clicks. Now I got to be very careful so it's not, in fact, let me, yeah, that would be a bad thing. I'm sorry I'm holding the camera while I'm trying to film this and do everything. And this thing needs to lay flat on the floor so that I'm not having to hop over pop or whatever they call it. All right, so let's go ahead and, there we go. So now we got everything we need to run this thing remotely and to install Proxmox on it, which is what we're going to do next. So I'm going to go ahead and just plug everything in, turn it on, make sure we got lights on the motherboard. We do. So we should be able to do the rest from my desk. All right, so now that we've got the virtual machines put in a safe location, and I've pulled all the cards out of the system. So, yeah, I got it down to just the 10 gig network card. Now, you need to assume I've already gone to the BIOS and disabled the onboard networking card. There's, I think, 2 1 gig networking adapters on here and one, I believe it's a 10100. It might be a gigabit management LAN connection. I don't know. It's above my pay grade. So let me go ahead and log into the IPMI here. And we're going to try and do everything through here. Now I've also inserted a USB key and in the USB port on the back. I'm going to come over here to remote control, IV, KVM, HTML5, and then we're going to see if we can't get to it here. So I'm going to go ahead and power the unit on. We'll go ahead and bring the virtual keyboard up just to be sure. Okay, good. It's going to invoke the boot menu. I hit F11 evidently. Okay, I don't know what A2 is, but maybe it'll come up. There we go. I just need to be patient. So this time I want to boot off of the UEFI drive, the Kingston Data Traveler. And we'll see if it boots into Proxmox installer. Welcome to Grub. There it is. So we're going to install Proxmox VE graphical installer. Now this is the benefit of having IPMI or IKVM on a machine. You could imagine if this thing was across town, I'd be able to do it from here. The reason I pull all the cards out of this thing is because I've had trouble with this AMD Epyc when I loaded Proxmox before, and I needed to load the Proxmox, get it set up on it, and then go out and add the cards, and then Proxmox seemed to be fine. So it's gotten an IP address of 5.76. We're not going to be using that. All right, sometimes the screens, they get a little askew here, so you got to deal with that. I agree. We're going to install it on the 1 terabyte internal SSD or NVMe SSD. Click on Next. United States, we're going to do Chicago. And this is basically for the time zone. And then we'll enter our super secret password. Next. All right, so we're going to call this the Super-Epyc.ujp.local. And it's going to be 12 is our address. 192.68.5.12. /24. Everything else is correct. Our gateway and our DNS. Remember, I'm using an internal DNS server running under my Active Directory domain controller. And then I'm just going to have it automatically reboot after a successful install. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let it run. And when it's done, it will reboot and we will come back and continue with the configuration. All right, so it's installed. Well, it says it's installed. It's rebooting now. So we're going to let it reboot. We're going to let it come up to the login screen for Proxmox. Hopefully it'll boot right off the NVMe SSD. And then what we're going to do is once we verify that we can log in, we're going to shut the unit down. And we're going to try and install those two cards. So right now it says if I log into 5.12 at 8006, I should be able to get into that unit. Let's go try that. All right, well, that's a good sign. It's telling me there's a secured website with an invalid certificate. Now, there is a way to fix that. We're not going to go into that video today, but all right, so there we are. I am now logged in, and Proxmox is up and running on the Super-Epyc server. And as you can see there, we've got some lots and lots of RAM and lots of CPUs to play around with. So that was successful. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, before I do, I could go out and get the updates done. I could go out and enable pass-through. I could go do this. I could go do that, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to install the cards in it, the ones that I took out, and then I'm going to put the turn the unit back on and make sure it boots. So I'm going to come up here for right now, and I'm going to simply shut down Proxmox from here, and then we'll take a walk over to the desk, and we'll go see if it's working. As you can see, my trusty assistant is right here. Bench light on.
Okay.
All right, so it looks like everything's powered off. I don't see any fans running. I don't see a power indicator on the front, but just to be safe, we're going to pull the power. Should have turned the switch off first. Let's see, and you should be able to see the overhead view from here. So I'm going to go ahead and put these two cards back in. The GTX 1650 and the Tesla M40. Alright, so we got both the GTX 1650 in, we've got the M40, we've got the supplemental power here and here, and we've plugged in the fan. So let's plug it in, turn the master power on, and then let's come around to the front, hit the power button. Yep, looks like everything's lighting up. We'll see if we get anything on the monitor here. Hopefully we will. And there it appears to be booting. That's a good sign. So here is the problem. When I added those two cards, it moved this card to a different configuration, which means I'm gonna have to go in through the IPMI to log in to Proxmox. And then we're going to have to nano the Etsy default configuration file for the network and rename it so that we can get the network adapter to work, because again, it has moved. Now I could just try to reinstall Proxmox, but we wouldn't learn anything if I did that. So let's go back to the workstation and I'll figure out how to change the IP address or the name of the network card and show you how I do it. So this is another good reason to have IPMI, man, because can you imagine you called somebody at the remote location and said, hey, plug these cards in, they did it, they rebooted, and suddenly you can't connect? So yeah, let's go into our IKVMI. There we go. So now we should be able to log in. Now this is where it's handy to know some Linux commands. So if I do IPA, you'll see that my my network card, the ENP37S0, is now the name of the card, the 10 gig card. But the problem is, you see it doesn't have an IP address or anything associated with it, right? So let's go take care of that. So the first thing we're going to do is nano etsy or /etsy/network /interfaces. Hit enter. And you see our problem right there. The iFace is called ENP36S0. It needs to be 37. So when we added those cards, it changed that card number to 37 from 36. It's why our network wasn't working anymore. Now we need to also come down here under the interface settings and change this one to read 37S0. And then we can control X to, hang on a second, you're not seeing the bottom half of the screen. There we go. Control X and then Y to save the modified buffer, and then hit enter. And then I'm just going to type in reboot from here, and it's going to go ahead and restart. It's going to restart Proxmox. And then we'll, once it restarts, we'll come back and I'll show you how to test using the KVM. All right, so I looked a little bit closer at those errors that popped up that I caught when I was handheld earlier. And basically, they're telling me the Nuvo drivers aren't loading for NVIDIA and whatnot. And so don't be concerned about that. We'll fix that shortly. I'm going to go ahead. It's a non-issue right now, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. Now, I'm logging in at the console again because I want to test and make sure it's working. So I'm going to ping my gateway and see if we get a reply. And we do. So now we know that that is working. So I'm going to go ahead and close this window. I'm going to come back here. We're going to refresh this screen, and bingo, bing, bang, boom, it logs us in. The next thing we're going to do is go here to repositories, and we're going to add the non-subscription repository. And click on add. And then I'm going to come to each one of these. The first one is the enterprise. I'm going to disable that. And then the Ceph Quincy enterprise, I'm going to disable that. Then I'm going to come back here to updates. I'm going to refresh this, and it's going to warn us. There is a way to get rid of that nag, but I'm not going to go into that right now. That's an advanced topic. So once it tells you the task is okay and it grays out the stop button, then you're ready to come back, and you see all the updates. And I would recommend don't do these on a production system without good backups. Okay? I haven't recently, not in the last couple of years that I can think of, had a problem with doing updates and rebooting and having them break something. But your mileage might vary. Keep in mind this is a community supported open source KVM software. So keep that in mind. Don't just assume that these updates are okay to do. Do your research. Okay, I'll leave that up to you. That's all I'm going to talk about on that. So I don't have to do anything else other than click on upgrade. And then when it asks if I want to install it, it's a gig worth of updates. So it's pretty sizable. I'm going to tell it Y for yes. Hit enter and let it run. And we'll come back. So it appears the updates are complete, and it says, please consider rebooting. Well, I'm not going to consider. I'm going to reboot. So let's disconnect. We're going to come back up here to the summary page, and we're going to come up and we're going to click on reboot and tell it yes. We'll give it about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. All right, so it appears we were successful. I'm going to go back here to updates one more time. I'm going to refresh. And hopefully we're done with the updates. And it appears we are. And if we come here to the summary, it tells us what version we're on. So we're on 8.2.7. Wow, already up to 7. I thought we were on 8.2.4. Shows you how much attention I pay to things. Now, the next thing I like to do, I like to get my remote drives connected to my Proxmox server. So there's A few of them I set up by default. One is the ISO folder, and two is the backups folder. So I can restore all those lovely machines we just backed up. And those are NFS shares on my Synology NAS. So I'm assuming you know how to set up an NFS share on either your whatever server you're using, whether it be TrueNAS or Unraid or wherever else. You can set up a CIFS, SMB share, NFS, iSCSI, whatever you want. I prefer NFS because it works well with Synology. It's really easy to set up. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to come down here or go up here to the data center view. And another complaint of mine is why they put it in here. I don't know. Go here to storage, come back to add, and we're going to do an NFS. We're going to add our ISO share. So you need to give it a name. And then type in the IP address of your server, or if you have your DNS set up, you could do that DNS, fully qualified DNS name there. And then you should be able, if you've got it in there correctly, you should be able to see your shares on that Synology NAS or whatever it is you're using. So the volume, it's volume 1 ISO. And then these are simply ISO images. So I select that and deselect disk image. And then click on add. And so now I have my ISOs available. And once that updates, once it gives me the gray question mark goes away, I should be able to go out and browse the images, and there they are. Same way with the backups. So we have to come up to data center. And we're going to do NFS share. And I'm just going to give it a label of backups. Same server. 3. And this time it's going to be the backups share. And this is going to be VZDump backup files, and only VZDump backup files. Click on add. And then that should add it down here just like it did with the ISO. Show it as a disk. And bing, bang, boom. If we go into there, there's all of our backups. You remember these? We made these backups the other day. On the 1st, I believe. Yeah. All right. Now, the other thing I like to do, well, look, it's already set up the disk. So if we go in here under disks, you'll see my NVMe disk is already set up. Ignore this device SDA, okay? That's the data traveler drive. That's a USB drive I left plugged in. But as you can see, it's already partitioned up my NVMe drive, and it's given me a local storage, which only has about, 100 gig free. And then it gave me my local LVM, which is the rest of my NVMe storage device on there. So this is fast local storage where we can store virtual machine drives or virtual machine disks. Now, the other thing I can do is I can SSH into this thing now. So what I'm going to do is go out to, I'm under Windows, I'm going to go out to the PowerShell, and I'm going to SSH into this server. And the rest of the command line stuff that we're going to do, I'm going to do on the command line. I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? All right, so we're here on the command prompt. So I'm going to SSH, and it's going to be root at, and then my IP address. And because I've logged into this machine before, it keeps a record of that, of the known hosts, and says, hey, your certificate doesn't match. Do you want me to show you how to fix that? Okay, here we go. Bring up File Explorer. You need to go to your users folder. So you go to users, then your login name. And under there is a SSH. Is it an SSH? No, where is it? Where is the folder I'm looking for? Is it SSH? Yeah, and then edit known hosts. So I'm going to open that with, let's see, I'm going to open that with, why doesn't it show Notepad++? That's interesting. Well, we'll just open it with Notepad. Just once. And let me get some stuff off of here. Bring it over. Expand it. So we're looking for anything with 5.12 in it. So I'm just going to skim down here looking for 5.12. There's 5.11. You could do a search for this as well, but I've trained my eyes to see this stuff. There we go. There's a couple of them right there. So everything where it has 512 from the beginning to the end, you're going to delete that. Then you're going to save your host file. And then you should be able to run that command. I just hit the up arrow, run that command again, and then now it'll store the new key. And there you go. Type in your password. And bing, bang, boom, you're in. Now, the first thing you need to do is edit grub so that we can tell it that we need to use IOMMU on this computer. So I just use nano space /Etsy /default /grub. And grub is, I must have typed something wrong. Yeah, I always transpose that. I'm dyslexic. Give me a break. There we go. Nano Etsy default grub. And what you're going to do is edit this line right here. Now, all I ever insert here, Intel, is Intel _IOMMU equals on. Okay, that's all I put in there. Now, some people say that you should put in there IOMMU equals PT. Some say you should put that in there plus PCIe _ACS override equals downstream. That's an old article. It actually, if you use an AMD processor, you're not even required to put this command in anymore, is my understanding with Proxmox. But this is all I put in there. Intel _IOMMU equals on. And that's wrong because this is an AMD system, right? So we wouldn't want to use Intel. We'd want to use AMD. Now, according to the documentation, you're not necessarily supposed to have to put that in there. So let's test that theory. I'm not going to save the modified buffer. We're going to go back to our Proxmox screen here, right here. And let's do, actually we could stay out at the command line. So let's do this. Let's do an LSPCI. And what an LSPCI is it just gives you simply a dump of all of the IOMMU groups and their associated devices. So if we look through here, you'll see something interesting. It looks like it's put all the devices in their own groups. And what we're specifically looking for is the NVIDIA controllers. So there's an A-Speed, there's the Intel Ethernet controllers, and you can see 4 and 5, they're on their own IOMMU groups. Let's see, the SATA controller, PCI bridge, audio device. There we go. So there's a VGA compatible GeForce 1660. It's on its own IOMMU group 21, along with the audio device. Now let's look for the NVIDIA, the other NVIDIA, and here's another one. NVIDIA Tesla M40. It's on group 41, and it's not shared with anything else. So I don't think it's really necessary to put those commands in there in grub. Now, your mileage might vary. If you have an Intel, do it, right? If you do put it in there, it's not going to hurt anything. You're not going to break the system. So, you do you. I'm going to go ahead and put it in there just for the sake of argument. Just hit an arrow up and go back and use our command over. Come down here to the line. And then put a space in there and put AMD _IOMMU equal on. And then Control X and then tell it Y to save. Hit Enter to give it the name. And now the next thing we're going to do is update grub. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to exclude, or we need to add some modules to our list of modules. So we're going to do a nano /Etsy /modules. And you see that file is empty right now. What we're going to do is we're going to add these modules to that group, to that file right here. Okay. We're going to do Control X and yes to save it, hit enter, and now it's loaded. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and blacklist drivers. Remember I told you those drivers were coming up with an error when we first booted into Proxmox. This command will blacklist all those drivers, the Radeon, the Nuvo, and the NVIDIA, so that they can't be. What we're trying to do is keep Proxmox from using them for the operating system Proxmox. We want to be able to have those items free and clear to be able to give to a virtual machine. Make sense? Okay. And then the next thing you need to do is update the init RAM file system and reboot. That's all. This is all I ever do. So I'm going to copy, paste that command there, hit enter. This will take a second or two. So basically, I think this is the boot, whatchamacallit, you're rewriting, so it gets all those things. And that's it. That's it. And then I'm going to simply reboot. It helps if you're on the right screen. Reboot, it closes the connection, and then we should see we lose the connectivity to our Proxmox server here in a minute. So we'll give it about 5 minutes. We'll let that reboot, and we'll come back and we'll do the next phase. All right, so we've survived another reboot. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, I'm going to restore a machine I already have set up. And we're going to do a PCI pass-through. We're going to pass through a video card from that, from Proxmox to that virtual machine and see if it works. See if all our work is good. So I'm going to come over here onto backups. And there should be one here that is a lab machine with the 1660 video card in it already. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that file, click on restore, and I'm going to give it a machine ID of, I'm going to start with 101. You can give it whatever you want to. And the storage is going to be on local LVM. And it's already got everything set up. It's 4 cores, 4 gig of RAM, etc. I'm going to click on restore. Now this is going to take a little bit of time depending on how fast your storage is. I've got a 10 gig connection to this machine, so mine should be fairly speedy. Your mileage might vary. When the restore is complete, we'll come back and we'll look at the settings. So it looks like the virtual machine was restored successfully. Let's go take a look. So come up here to the machine. Let's go to hardware. And let's see. So we've got the Win ISO here. We don't need this. So I'm going to go ahead and just tell it, do not use any media. And then we're going to get rid of this one. We don't need that second IDE drive in there. And let's see. It's got me set up to use PCI device 21, which is, I think it's the wrong card. 21. Yeah, it is 21. I am wrong. It's 2100. So that's cool. PCI Express, ROM bar. I'm not going to set it as the primary GPU, so that's all good. Display is set to none. Now, so if I go ahead and fire this machine up, it should come up and eventually get an IP address here once it starts. And once it gets an IP, then we can try to RDP into it and see if we've got this RTX 1650, if we've got it passed through and can use it in the virtual machine. So this might take a little while to boot. We'll come back after it's booted up. All right, so according to Proxmox, the machine is now up and running. And it's given us an IP address of 5.85, so I've gone ahead and I have connected to that unit. And you can indeed see that the machine is up and running. And if I come here to Device Manager, you'll also see that we now have the network card, the GTX 1660, in pass-through mode. Now, one thing I didn't do on this machine, and I want to, is I want to give it some more CPU cores, And I want to give it some more RAM. I want to give it maybe 16 gig of RAM. We'll start with 8, and we'll start with 8 cores of this CPU of this AMD. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and shut down this virtual machine. And we'll wait for it to tell us over here that it's shut down. There we go. And we'll come here to hardware. Let's go ahead and go to the processors, and let's give it, let's go ahead and give it 8 cores. We'll leave that type at host. And then for the memory, we'll just double that to 8192. All right. Come back here to the summary. And now we'll go ahead and restart the virtual machine. It might take it a minute this time to come up because we've changed the configuration. Just be aware of that. All right, so it's up and running. So let's bring up Remote Desktop Connection Manager, and let's, I don't think this machine's a member of the domain, but this may work. There we go, it's up and running. Give it a second to come up, stabilize. And go to the task manager and see how everything's doing here. We should see 8 cores and 8 gig of RAM now, and we do. That's good. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and launch LM Studio. And there's probably an update, but we're not going to do that today. I just want to show you that it's going to come up and run, and we'll be able to load a model. And you can see, yes, there is an update available. I'm just going to go ahead and go full screen here. And I'm going to do a new chat. And I'm going to select the Llama 323B instruct, and I'm going to load it. Meanwhile, we can monitor Task Manager over here and see how it does. You'll see LM Studio is starting to load that model into memory, and it looks like it's done that. And we'll tell it to wake up. There we go. So let's see. Tell me about the creation of the universe. Alrighty. Looks like we're getting a pretty good rate. As you can see, this is a very lightweight model, so it's doing it very well. I don't know that it's going to tell us how many tokens per second it generated, but I'd say it's probably doing about 30, 35 maybe. But you see, it's pretty frugal with memory and with CPU, but I'm glad we give it those extra cores. That comes in handy. We'll just let it figure it. It's given us quite a detailed answer here. Big Bang Theory, transparent. And so actually it's only 17.77 tokens per second. It tells you down here now. And have it go off on a, see how it does here. A theoretical framework. Good. See, it used to be they would label this as something out there. But anyway. Cool. It looks like it's answering a bit slower than it did with the origin of the universe. We'll see how many tokens per second it ends up giving us here. Should be done here pretty shortly. It might have more info to give. That might be why it's going slower, but even tells you down here how much RAM it's using in CPU. Now, that was only 11.94 tokens per second. So again, not something I would usually use this for, but it's a good example of how CPU pass-through works with a Proxmox virtual machine, and of course then good old Proxmox running in the background and doing all the things it needs to do. Well, there you go. That's how I set it up for my use case. Now, yours might be a little bit different. Now, what I'm going to do, if I can remember it with my primitive 8 brain, is to put the down in the notes section the article I used to set all this up, how I learned how to do this. And you can do all of the, you need to read the article carefully is what I think I'm trying to say, because you don't need to do everything in this article. Mind you, this article is back concerning PCI pass-through to through Proxmox from a few years ago. So your mileage might vary, and some of the stuff you may not have to do anymore. So do your research, but it'll give you at least a guide, the same guide that I used. And if I was able to figure it out from this guide, you should be able to as well. So anyway, we hope you found the video entertaining and informative. As always, please give us a thumbs up down below if you liked the video. Leave your comments down in the comments section. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and click that little notification bell to be notified of new videos when they come out. Donate if you're so inclined. We take PayPal, Patreon, YouTube join function. All of our social media links are at UnkyJoesPlayhouse.com. Be sure to come check out the site. It's just a landing site, but it'll give you contact information is what I'm desperately trying to say here. Thanks again for coming to see us. And don't forget, we'll see all of you on the other side.
I've been watching old Unky Joe. From Texas heat to where the cacti grow. Fixing server solar power in the land. Hoping that his plans all stand. Making life a touch more bright.